Fox News alert, dramatic new video showing 24 hostages in Red Cross vans being driven to safety after spending nearly 50 days in captivity by the terrorists known as Hamas. Among them are 13 Israeli women and children, but no Americans were freed. Fighting in Gaza pausing for the first time since the war started way back on October 7th. And this is for a 4-day truce. President Biden is reacting for the first time.
From the moment Hamas kidnapped these people, I, along with my team, have worked around the clock to secure their release. Teddy bears waiting to greet those children at the hospital are a stark reminder of the trauma these children have been through, and at such a very young age. We expect more hostages to be released tomorrow, and more the day after, and more the day after that.
What are the chances of this truce to be extended by a few days or more?
I think the chances are real. I don't trust Hamas to do anything right. I only trust Hamas to respond to pressure.
We're hearing that more hostages could be released tomorrow. Jeff Paul is live in southern Israel with more on this. Jeff?
Yeah, Joey, and on top of the 13 who were released, as you mentioned, we are learning another 13 likely to be released tomorrow. The Israeli government confirming they do have a list of names, and they're in the process of calling all the families of the hostages to let them know exactly who is on that list and who is not. It's a bit of a bittersweet, though, development when you realize there are still more than 200 people, according to the Israeli government, who are being held hostage by Hamas. But today, nonetheless, was a huge and significant first step. Now, here's what we know about who was released. 24 people so far being released by Hamas. 13 Israelis, 11 foreign nationals. Among the Israelis freed, we know 4 were kids, ages ranging from 2 years old to 9 years old. One of those kids, Ohad Munder, actually turned 9 years old while being held by Hamas. Now, 3 were also mothers and 6 are elderly women. So far, the truce between Israel and Hamas appears to be holding, but IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari says even with the pause in fighting, Israeli forces remain focused on one of their core objectives, and that's rooting out Hamas.
During the days of the pause, the IDF will continue the preparations for the next phases of the war. IDF troops are ready and prepared on all the fronts.
Now, this was the moment when a convoy of rescue hostages passed by a group of Israelis. They were cheering and clapping, just knowing some of those people were finally getting home. And it is critical, though, this ceasefire keeps up to continue that flow. With the pause in fighting, though, several different aid trucks made their way into Gaza, delivering things like fuel and cooking gas. We also know that 33 Palestinian prisoners, both women and teenagers, were released from Israel. So the next couple days are going to be critical. We know, again, another 13 will be released tomorrow. If this truce holds, it looks like more aid will be getting in, and the next day after that, we'll see the same thing happening. We're also learning tonight that the hospital where the kids were taken, Schneider Hospital here in Israel, they're reporting that the kids appear to be in good condition. Joey?
Thanks, Jeff. Stay safe. And as we pray for the safe return of all the hostages, the liberal media is once again making an absolute fool out of themselves over this very topic. Take a look at this Israeli spokesman's stunned reaction over a bizarre question about the hostage deal.
I was speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning. He made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives?
That is an astonishing accusation. If we could release one prisoner for every one hostage, we would obviously do that. We are operating in horrific circumstances.
Yeah, that look really says it all. And if that wasn't crazy enough, anti-Israel protesters were going to glue their hands to the ground today in trying to disrupt the Macy's Thanksgiving parade yesterday. There were more protests happening today, including these folks who shouted at President Biden while he was in Nantucket. Katie, with this idea of them chanting Free Palestine, I was on 7th Street yesterday and a big group came down behind me. But let's take it back to the tactical side of this, because we have two wars happening at once. We have a ground war and we have a propaganda or information war. And, I've gone back and forth, a lot of conversations on this. But what do you think this release, that Hamas was willing to come to the table? I mean, their most valuable asset are these hostages. What does this mean tactically and with the information war, that they're willing to release hostages?
Well, first, I would say to those who are still screaming Free Palestine, you've had a ceasefire now. So that was supposed to be something that was a negotiation piece, and they're still doing it, which proves that they don't want Israel to exist at all. But clearly the reason we're here with the ceasefire and the release of hostages is not because of just diplomatic negotiations that are happening in Qatar, where the Iranian prime minister was visiting either yesterday or the day before. It's because of Israel's military action in the Gaza Strip to pressure them to come to the table. Now, we don't know where all of these hostages are. Hamas says that they are trying to locate them within the Gaza Strip. We know that some Palestinian Gaza residents took some of them hostage to keep them for payment. Other groups like Islamic Jihad also had some of these hostages, so locating where they are is very difficult. But it really does contrast in terms of the numbers. 50 Israeli hostages for 150 Palestinian terrorists. These are not people who were taken from their homes and slaughtered or taken hostage from a music festival. These are people who attempted to kill Israeli soldiers, who attempted to kill Israeli citizens, and they are now being equated as the same thing. They are not. Finally, I would say Hamas is still continuing the psychological warfare. They returned a woman today who they claimed was dead, so her family believed for many, many weeks that she was not around. Thank God she was returned. But they know what they're doing in terms of psychological warfare. And again, this is a group that is holding babies hostages. And we hear a lot about war crimes and international law. That is one of the violations, and maybe people should focus on that a little more than what Israel is doing.
Jimmy, back to that very odd interview on Sky News where somehow they tried to say that, I guess, an Israeli life is worth more. I didn't really understand even what she was trying to say. But ultimately, you got basically one hostage for every 3 prisoners. These are completely innocent life versus 3 people who have committed crimes and been convicted. Plus, they stopped aerial surveillance. They had to stop their assault. Hamas is going to rebuild, or at least try to regain some footing about themselves. They're so scattered. Did Israel get a good deal? Do you think they were pressured to do it?
Well, I think there was a lot of pressure to do this, but I think what's so frustrating is they tried to frame them as moral equals. In that Israel chooses to do business in this fashion. Israel is in an impossible situation right now. They're not trading, as Katie said, good people for good people, okay? One side are civilians that were taken hostage against their will. One side is a bunch of thugs and murderers. But they've gotten used to getting their way when it comes to these hostage exchanges. I mean, we did a hostage exchange with Iran where we sent over billions of dollars and we sent over more people than we got back. And that's always been the status quo because we value life more than they do. And that's what makes it so frustrating, is when they try to establish a moral equivalency, you realize there is none. One side is willing to kill babies. One side is willing to paraglide into a rave and kill innocent civilians. The other side is going out of its way to avoid those casualties.
Tulsi, if there is any pressure coming to Israel, you have to believe some of it might be from the Biden administration, which I will go on a limb and say the Biden administration should be trying to get Americans home. Like, that should be a priority. I want to play a quick clip here from President Biden on what he thinks is the catalyst for all of this.
I cannot prove what I'm about to say, but I believe one of the reasons why Hamas struck when they did was they knew that I was working very closely with the Saudis and others in the region to bring peace to the region by having recognition of Israel and Israel's right to exist. There's overwhelming interest, and I think most Arab nations know it, in coordinating with one another to change the dynamic in their region for longer-term peace. And that is what I'm going to continue to work on.
Now, I want to note an Israeli spokesperson basically backed that up and did give him some credit. But if I look at the previous administration, you've got Abraham Accords, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, killing a chief lieutenant in the Iranian terrorist army, in my opinion. Is this an American posture that drove Hamas to do this, or is this more regional?
Look, I think it's both. We have to look at the bigger picture, and I don't disagree with what he said. And it's clear that what they wanted to accomplish is actually happening, and that's the terrible thing. We talk about different types of warfare that are occurring, the information warfare, the psychological operations.
Away. Okay.
Completely.
Yeah.
Those talks have stopped completely, and any progress that was being made in that direction has gone away. But when you listen to that Sky News reporter and the question that she asked, she's emblematic of this broader issue we're seeing with many so-called reporters who aren't just reporting facts, but instead essentially doing Hamas's work for them. Hamas's goal is to turn the world against Israel in order to reach their objective goal and the goal of other Islamist groups and countries, frankly, which is wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They're succeeding in doing that by using these reporters who have become their propagandists. And those who are naturally compassionate by nature are hearing this and hearing things that are not representative of the truth and falling for it and turning against Israel and not actually seeing the truth of how Islamists and terrorist groups like Hamas, as you know, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and others, they have always used civilians as human shields. They have always hidden behind them for this exact reason, because they know that the news media, many of them, will throw this propaganda out there without telling the full story about their barbaric tactics and their willingness to sacrifice women and children, innocent civilians, to achieve their objective. And so people need to understand the whole truth on this whole war.
Part of this whole truth, Doctor, is the fact that these hostages come home and they are going to be treated well. But at some point, Israel has to go in and they have to ask them questions. They have to get some information from them. They have heard conversations and maybe how many people were in this room or that room. How difficult is that going to be for those hostages?
Well, certainly one of the biggest disappointments I had today when the president spoke was he still said he has no idea the conditions of the American hostages. We don't even have an accurate number of how many Americans are still being held hostage there. And yet, as Jimmy pointed out, Israel values life, and that is why there is a ceasefire right now, and they have decided to put pause on their ground operation, knowing that they are prolonging how much longer innocent civilians are still going to be in these tunnels of terror. And so, yes, we are so grateful that some were returned today, but there are still many down there. We don't know how they're doing, and the emotional and physical aspects and the consequences of being down in these tunnels, they're going to be very long-lasting. And yes, they are going to have to speak to authorities, and they're going to have to recount these traumas. And as you know, Joey, once you have experienced trauma, that is something that will stick with you for your entire life, and they're going to have to recount it over and over again.
Yeah, I only hope that what they've learned in servicing veterans here the last 20 years, I hope some of that is applied. I hope that, if nothing else, our sacrifice and work can be helpful in that way.
Well, absolutely, but as you know, it is a tough road, and there are still Americans and many innocent civilians being kept in these tunnels of terror.
Well, we know some of the families are still broken up, so some people that did get released today have members that are hostage.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.